Richard Coleman had learned to ignore unknown numbers. In his world, they were almost always distractions, vendors pushing deals, journalists sniffing for a story, or opportunists with a can't-miss investment pitch. But that morning, seated at the head of a glass-walled boardroom overlooking Manhattan, something stopped him. His phone buzzed, the screen glowing with a number he didn't recognize. For the briefest second, he considered letting it ring out. Then something in his chest tightened. He swiped to accept. Hello? His voice was curt, impatient. On the other end, he heard chaos, sirens wailing, tires screeching, people shouting. Beneath it all was a tiny, trembling voice, almost lost in the noise. Is this Mr. Coleman? Richard's back stiffened. Speaking. Who is this? The line crackled. A pause stretched, filled only by distant horns blaring through the receiver. Then came the words that shattered him. I'm sorry to call, but your son is lying on the sidewalk. He's bleeding bad. For a heartbeat, Richard's mind went blank. Not figuratively, his entire system froze, as though his body refused to process the message. His chair screeched back, slamming into the glass wall behind him. The boardroom fell silent. Executives stared. His assistant dropped her tablet. What did you just say? His voice, once commanding, was now deadly still. He was attacked. Some big kids, they ran. I think he hit his head. There's blood. He's not waking up. The girl's words tumbled out, fragile yet urgent. Richard felt his heart thunder back to life, pounding in his throat. Where are you? In the South Bronx, near 146th and Willis. Next to the basketball court, the South Bronx. A place Richard had driven past in his chauffeured car, but never truly entered. And now his son was bleeding on its cracked sidewalks. Stay there, he barked, already storming out of the room. He didn't wait for questions from his stunned colleagues. The elevator ride was suffocating. He barely felt the descent, only the dread clawing at his insides. Outside, a black car screeched up. His driver stammered something, but Richard cut him off. South Bronx, now, the city blurred past. Skyscrapers gave way to weathered brownstones, manicured avenues to streets lined with graffiti and shuttered storefronts. The further uptown they sped, the louder the thump in Richard's ears. Images assaulted his mind. Ethan, his 12-year-old boy, bright and full of questions, lying broken on cold pavement. Finally, the car screeched to a halt near the park. Richard flung the door open before it fully stopped, and then he saw him. Ethan lay sprawled on the sidewalk near a chain-link fence, his school jacket stained with dark patches. His face was ghostly pale, a bruise blooming across his cheek. But what seized Richard's attention was the girl crouched beside him. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Her jeans were ripped at the knees, sneakers several sizes too large. A cracked phone trembled in her small hands. Her lips were tinged blue from the cold, but her eyes wide, fierce, unflinching, were locked on Ethan. Richard stumbled forward, his polished shoes crunching broken glass. Are you the one who called me? The girl nodded, hugging herself tightly. Yes, sir. You stayed with him? I didn't want him to be alone, she whispered. He was crying before he passed out. Richard's throat closed. He knelt beside Ethan, pressing trembling fingers to his neck. Relief surged. There was a pulse, faint but steady. The girl shifted, uncertain, as Richard's driver rushed up behind them. Ambulance is on its way, sir. Richard looked at the child again. She couldn't stop shivering, her knuckles white around the cracked phone. And yet she hadn't left. Strangers passed by, eyes sliding away, unwilling to intervene. But this girl, this tiny, fragile figure had stayed. For the first time in years, Richard felt something stir in him that had nothing to do with business, or wealth, or power, pure human concern. Minutes later, the paramedics arrived, lifting Ethan onto a stretcher. Richard clutched his son's hand until the doors closed. Then, as the sirens wailed again, he turned back to the girl. What's your name? Anna, she said softly. Anna Johnson. He studied her, dirt smudged on her cheeks, scarf frayed, nose red from the biting wind. Then, impulsively, he asked, may I take your picture? Anna frowned, confused. Why? So I don't forget, Richard murmured. His voice cracked. The girl who did what no one else would, She gave the smallest, lopsided smile. He lifted his phone, snapped a single photo. Just one click dot, and in that instant, Richard Coleman, a man who could predict markets and outmaneuver rivals, realized his life had just collided with something far more unpredictable and infinitely more important. That night, in the sterile glow of the hospital waiting room, Richard sat with his head in his hands. Ethan's condition was uncertain, but there was hope. The image of Anna wouldn't leave his mind. Her voice, trembling yet resolute, echoed in his ears. He had always believed money could shield him from chaos, but that call proved otherwise. The chaos was real. The danger was real. And so was the courage of one little girl who refused to walk away. And Richard knew this was only the beginning. The fluorescent lights in the pediatric ICU softened everything, edges of voices, the hard facts of monitors, even the fear that kept ricocheting around Richard's chest. Beyond the glass, Ethan lay steady under a thin blanket, a strip of gauze at his hairline, and the fourth snaking from his arm. Machines hummed in a calm language Richard had never needed to learn. Tonight he listened like a student. A nurse adjusted the drip, glanced at Richard, and tried for something close to reassuring. He's stable. CT came back clean, concussion, contusions, but no intracranial bleeding. He'll likely be groggy when he wakes. Talk to him softly. He'll know your voice. Richard nodded like a man accepting a verdict he didn't understand yet. Thank you. When the nurse slipped out, he stood alone with the beeping, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the rise and fall of his son's chest. He could run valuation models in his head faster than most people could say hello. But there was no spreadsheet for this, no line item for terror, no pivot table for gratitude. A small cough sounded behind him. Richard turned. At the doorway, the girl from the sidewalk hovered like a shadow that refused to leave with the dark. Her scarf threadbare and once red hung crooked over her shoulder, the fringe damp from melted snow. Her jeans were rolled at the ankles to keep from tripping. The cracked phone was clutched to her chest as if it were a passport no one would stamp. Is he okay? She asked, cautious, as if the wrong tone might shatter the glass. He's resting, Richard said, and surprised himself with the softness in his voice. They think he'll wake soon. She nodded and took a step closer, then another, stopping at the foot of the bed as though there were an invisible line she knew not to cross. Her eyes tracked the steady green heartbeat on the monitor, then drifted to Ethan's face. She set her palm lightly on the metal rail. He cried, she said simply, before he fell asleep. I told him not to worry. I told him you'd come. Richard swallowed. Thank you for staying with him. She shifted, a little awkward, like praise was a language she only half understood. I didn't want him to be alone. What's your name again? He asked, though he'd already etched it into memory. Anna. She hesitated. Anna Johnson. Anna Johnson, he repeated, tasting the weight of it. Do you have someone I can call? Your mother, father? She shook her head, a quick, dismissive motion. Just grandma. But her phone doesn't always have minutes. Sometimes the battery dies and she can't charge it because she stopped herself. Eyes flicking to Ethan. It's okay. I know my way home. Richard looked past her to the dark hallway, to the vending machines humming like indifferent witnesses, to the security guard sipping coffee from a paper cup. He checked his watch. It's after 11. I can walk, she said. It's not far. How old are you, Anna? Her chin lifted in reflex. 7, she said, then added with determined precision, 7.5. He tried to smile and failed. 7.5 is still too young to walk home alone at this hour. She shrugged, a small roll of a small shoulder. You just stay where the lights are and keep moving. Don't stop for yelling. Don't look at cars when they slow. If someone says they need help, you go find a store with glass windows, not a door with a bell. The instructions poured out, practiced and matter-of-fact, the kind that didn't come from a classroom. Richard felt something twist in him. Who taught you that? People teach you by what happens, she said, as if quoting a rule pinned to a wall. He stared at her for a long beat. Then, are you hungry? She wavered. The machine has chips for $1. I have 72 cents. Richard reached for his wallet, then stopped. The gesture felt too simple for the complicated thing in front of him. Let's get you something warm from the cafeteria. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, Can I bring it back here? In case he wakes up. Yes, he said. In case he wakes up. They walked together down the corridor, the soles of her two large sneakers whispering against linoleum. In the cafeteria, the night menu was thin. Chicken noodle soup, grilled cheese, apple slices sealed in plastic smiles. Richard ordered everything that sounded like comfort and carried the tray, while Anna guarded a paper cup of hot chocolate as if it were gold. They sat near a window. Snow was starting again, slow-motion confetti through the sodium-lit dark. Anna blew on her soup. Steam kissed her cheeks pink. Where do you live? Richard asked. On Willis. Not far from the park. She slurped a noodle and added, almost apologetically, Grandma says we're there until the voucher goes through. He didn't know what that meant in detail, but he knew enough. Does she work? She does hair when she feels good. A pause. Some days she doesn't feel good. They ate quietly. The clock over the coffee machine thunked from 11:12 to 11:13. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried, then didn't, when the tray was empty. Anna sat straighter, like she'd remembered a script. I can go now. Thank you for the soup. Let me at least get you a ride, he said. I'll have my driver take you home. She shook her head so fast the scarf's fringe lifted. No cars, she said, and then, softer, as if betraying a private superstition, cars get you stuck. Stairs let you hide, Richard exhaled. He had built towers out of glass and steel and numbers, and here was a small person measuring safety in stairwells. Then I'll walk you, he said. She stared at him, suspicious of kindness that came without a price tag. You can't leave him. He glanced toward the elevators that would take him back to Ethan. You're right. He pulled out his phone and texted his driver with quick, clipped commands. Meet at her entrance. Follow at a distance. No questions. Then he turned back to Anna. If I got someone I trust to follow you and keep eyes on you from across the street, would that be okay? She considered the bargain like a seasoned negotiator. No closer than the bodega on the corner, she said. And if he gets too close, I run. Deal, Richard said, the corners of his mouth lifting. They returned to Ethan's room. The monitors continued their measured choreography. Anna stood at the foot of the bed again, fingers touching the rail, lips moving in a whisper Richard couldn't quite catch. What are you saying? He asked. She blinked as if surprised he'd heard. Just telling him he can come back now. Sometimes people need permission. Richard cleared his throat. Thank you, Anna. She nodded, as if they'd completed a transaction neither of them had signed. Then took a step toward the door, then another. At the threshold, she stopped. Can I see the picture? He pulled up the photo he'd taken, a small girl under a winter sky, fierce eyes above a scarf, the suggestion of sirens as streaks of red in the background. He held it out. She studied it with grave attention, as if she were looking at a stranger she hoped to understand. You won't forget? She asked. No, he said. I won't. Her mouth curved. Okay. She left with the caution of a cat, checking corners without seeming to. Richard waited until the elevator doors closed, then tapped his driver, on her 2 blocks behind. No contact. The reply came instantly. Got her. Richard turned back to Ethan and sat. Minutes layered into an hour. The snow outside thickened, erasing edges from the city he knew so well. He watched his son breathe and tried not to imagine the crack of a skull against concrete. A soft knock pulled him from the spiral. The door opened and his assistant, Neen, peered in, eyes red-rimmed from the late hour. I brought you clothes and your charger, she said, and the Foundation's legal counsel is on standby if you need anything. She hesitated. How is he? Holding steady. He hesitated. Neen, this girl, Anna, she's 7. She walked here and she was going to walk home. Her grandmother's sick. She didn't want a ride. Neen's mouth set in a thin line. Do you want me to call CPS? Richard looked at Ethan. He thought of stairwells as safe rooms, of rules for avoiding cars that slow down, of 72 cents counted with care. He nodded once. Yes, but quietly, no press. Not yet. After Neen left, he stood at the window and watched the snow smear the night. He remembered the first time he'd held Ethan, how light he'd felt, how heavy everything else suddenly became. A father's math redrawn overnight. His phone buzzed. Driver, she's at Willis. Lights out on the 3rd floor landing. She sat down on the stairs. Looks like she's wrapping herself in a trash bag. Want me to intervene? Richard stared at the screen until the words blurred. He typed back with shaking thumbs, no contact. Stay until she sleeps. Do not leave. Tell me if anyone approaches. He slid the phone into his pocket and looked at his son. Somebody stayed, he murmured. So now it's our turn. The monitor kept time. The snow resumed its hush. In the glass, his reflection looked like a man he recognized and a man he did not, still sharp in a suit he'd forgotten he was wearing, softer in all the places that mattered. He sat down, took Ethan's hand, and began to talk about ordinary things, about the Knicks game they were supposed to watch, about the sandwich shop that always got Ethan's order wrong, about the dog they didn't have but Ethan kept naming anyway. He talked until the room felt warmer and the machines felt less like machines and more like companions who would hold space until morning. When he finally fell silent, he felt the pivot in his bones. No flashing sign announced it. No triumphant music swelled. Just a quiet, unnegotiable decision hardening into fact. Tomorrow he would step into a system deliberately, not as a donor from a gala stage, but as a man who had someone specific to fight for. He would learn names and codes and forms. He would invite scrutiny he could not control. He glanced at Ethan, at the tender bruise lifting under pale skin. And we'll start with her, he said. Outside the glass, first light smudged the horizon like a promise written slow. Somewhere in the South Bronx, a small girl on a stairwell dreamed of doors that opened. In Manhattan, a father squeezed his son's hand and waited for him to come back when Ethan stirred. It was the smallest thing, a twitch at the corner of his mouth, the barest tremor of eyelids. Richard leaned forward, breath held. Dad? The word was a scrape of sound, fragile and miraculous. Richard laughed, a quiet sound that cracked at the edges. I'm here, kiddo. I'm right here. Ethan blinked. Who was the girl? The one who stayed, Richard said, and felt the truth of it settle in the room like warmth. He didn't say the rest aloud, that the girl who stayed might be the reason. Everything was about to change. He let Ethan's fingers close around his and held on, already bracing for the next call he would make when the sun fully rose. Because tonight had taught him a new rule. Sometimes, when a stranger refuses to look away, the only decent thing to do is follow their example and never look away again. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and sleeplessness. Richard Coleman hadn't moved from the hard plastic chair in hours. His tie hung loose, shirt wrinkled, but his gaze never left the bed where Ethan breathed in shallow rhythm. The boy's face, normally animated with curiosity, was swollen on one side, his lips split. Every rise of his chest was both comfort and torment. Anna was still there. She sat cross-legged in the hallway outside, back against the wall, the cracked phone dim in her lap. Nurses stepped around her. Visitors glanced, frowned, but she remained tiny frame wrapped in that red scarf, stubborn as stone. At last Richard stepped out, lowering himself beside her. He was a man used to marble lobbies, penthouse boardrooms, chauffeurs. But here, on the cold hospital floor, he sat as if it were the only seat left on earth. You didn't leave, he said. Anna shrugged. Didn't want him to wake up alone. Her words hit him harder than the stock market crash he once endured. He studied her too thin wrists, sneakers swallowing her feet, a shadow of defiance in eyes that had already learned not to expect much from adults. You should be sleeping, Richard said softly. So should you, she shot back. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant beep of monitors. Finally, Richard asked, Where do you live, Anna? On Willis Avenue, she answered cautiously. Near the park, 3rd floor. Do you live with your parents? Her face tightened, jaw working before she spoke. Just Grandma. She gets tired a lot. Sometimes she doesn't remember things, but it's fine. I know what to do. Richard's chest ached. And your parents? She looked down at her shoes. Don't know. Mama left when I was little. Daddy was never around. Then, after a beat, I'm used to it. No 7-year-old should have to be used to it, he thought. He searched for words, but Anna stood abruptly. I should go home now. Grandma will wonder. Richard rose with her. At least let me get you a ride. Her head shook fast. No cars, no strange doors. I'll walk. I always do. It's after midnight, Richard pressed. I'll be fine, she said, already hugging the scarf tighter. He wanted to argue, but Ethan stirred faintly inside the room, and instinct pulled Richard back. Torn between his son and this fragile stranger, he clenched his fists. Wait, he said quickly, pulling his phone. If you won't take a ride, then promise me keep this number. Call if you're in trouble. Call anytime. Anna hesitated, then typed the digits into her cracked screen. Okay, she turned to leave, steps soft and steady. Richard watched until the elevator doors swallowed her. Hours bled into morning. Ethan remained unconscious but stable. Richard's mind, however, chased shadows. He couldn't forget the image texted by his driver, the girl huddled on a stairwell, wrapped in a garbage bag for warmth. The thought gnawed at him. If he did nothing, she would vanish back into that darkness. He had influence, power, but for the first time in years, it wasn't mergers or markets he wanted to control. It was the fate of a little girl no one else seemed to notice. By mid-morning, Ethan blinked awake, groggy but alive. Relief crashed over Richard so hard he nearly wept. Ethan's first words, slurred but clear, were, "Where's the girl?" "She's safe," Richard said, though he wasn't certain. "She stayed," Ethan whispered. "She told me it'd be okay." Richard squeezed his son's hand. She was right, but even as he said it, a truth settled in his gut. Anna wasn't okay. Not really. And if he let her slip away now, the world would eat her alive. He rose, straightened his wrinkled shirt, and walked toward the reception desk. His voice was low but steady. "Child Protective Services," he said. "I need to report a minor." The receptionist blinked, startled. "A case?" "Yes," Richard replied, his jaw set, eyes dark with resolve. "A little girl, possibly without a guardian. Her name is Anna Johnson." That evening, Richard stood outside the Willis Avenue apartment building Anna had mentioned. The air reeked of burnt cooking oil and mildew. The stairwell light flickered overhead. He knocked on the peeling door of 3B. No answer. He knocked harder. Still silence. Pressing his ear to the wood, he heard only the hum of a refrigerator, the faint scuttle of roaches, and something heavier stillness, the kind born of neglect. He tried again. "Anna?" Nothing. As he turned to leave, a shadow shifted at the end of the hallway. Huddled in the corner of the stairwell, half covered by a black trash bag, sat Anna. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her scarf dirty, her cheeks smudged. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Go away," she rasped. Richard stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "It's me, Richard." She flinched, curling tighter. "I didn't want anyone to find me." He crouched to her level, heart breaking at the sight. "Anna, no one should have to sleep here." Her lip trembled. "I'm fine." But Richard saw the lie in her shivering frame, in the cracked skin of her hands. He had built skyscrapers to last 100 years. But this child looked like she might not last the winter. And in that moment, Richard Coleman, the man who once believed compassion was best left to charities and press releases, made a silent vow. He wasn't going to let Anna disappear. Not now. Not ever. The next evening, Richard found himself standing at the edge of a world he'd only glimpsed through tinted glass. The South Bronx at night wasn't the polished New York that appeared on magazine covers, or the sanitized skyline in real estate brochures. Here, streetlights flickered like dying stars. Graffiti sprawled across concrete walls like open wounds, and the cold pressed into every crack of the crumbling buildings. He adjusted his coat, trying to mask the discomfort of being out of his element. He'd made billions navigating hostile markets, but this was foreign terrain. Apartment 3B. That's where Anna had said she lived with her grandmother. The stairwell reeked of stale beer, fried grease, and mold. Each step creaked beneath his polished shoes, announcing him like an intruder. On the third floor, he knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Anna," only silence. A faint drip echoed somewhere deeper in the hall. He pressed his ear to the door. The refrigerator hummed inside. A TV murmured faintly, its glow seeping through a crack near the frame. But no footsteps, no voice. Richard stepped back, unease gnawing at him. Then he heard a soft rustle down the corridor. He turned. Huddled in the stairwell corner, curled into herself like a discarded doll, was Anna. A garbage bag draped over her small body, failing to hide the tremor in her limbs. Her scarf was dirtied, the fringe torn. Her cheeks were smudged, her lips cracked. "Anna," he whispered. She flinched, eyes wide, like an animal cornered. "Go away, it's me." "Richard," he said, raising his hands as if approaching fragile glass. She curled tighter. "I didn't want anyone to find me." Richard's chest constricted. "You can't sleep here. It's freezing." Her voice was brittle, defensive. "I've done it before." He knelt, ignoring the grime that smeared onto his expensive coat. "Anna, listen to me. This isn't safe. You shouldn't have to live like this." Her chin quivered, but she said nothing for a long moment. Richard just knelt there, studying her. The strongest negotiators in the world had folded under his stare. But this child, frail, stubborn, already weathered by life, held her silence like a shield. Finally, he said, almost to himself, "You deserve better." The words hung in the stairwell, carried on the distant hum of sirens. Back in his car, Richard couldn't shake the image. He stared at the city sliding past, his reflection warped in the window. He remembered every luxury gala where he'd written checks for at-risk youth programs, speeches about opportunity, photo ops with smiling children in matching t-shirts. But none of those faces were Anna's. None of them had her cracked phone, her oversized sneakers, her weary eyes that seemed older than her years. This wasn't charity anymore. This was personal. 2 days later, Ethan was sitting upright in bed, color slowly returning to his cheeks. Richard hovered at his side when Anna appeared again in the doorway, tentative but unshakable. "You came back," Ethan said, smiling weakly. Anna nodded. "I wanted to make sure you're okay. You stayed with me," Ethan told his father, voice still hoarse. "She told me I'd be fine before I fell asleep." Richard met Anna's eyes. Something in him cracked. Gratitude, guilt, resolve, all tangled into one truth. He couldn't let this child slip back into invisibility. "Yes," Richard said firmly, "it will be okay." But even as he said it, he knew the road ahead was anything but simple. That evening, Richard dialed a number he rarely used. "Child Protective Services," he told the operator. "I need to report a minor. Name's Anna Johnson. No guardian fit to care for her." As he hung up, he realized what he'd just done. He had stepped into a fight not measured in stocks or profits, but in custody hearings and social services. And for the first time in years, Richard Coleman wasn't thinking about shareholders. He was thinking about one girl in a stairwell, one girl who refused to walk away. The morning sun over Manhattan should have brought relief, but for Richard Coleman, it marked the beginning of a battle he never expected to fight. The night had been long. Ethan was finally stable, doctors optimistic about his recovery. Yet Richard's mind refused to settle. Anna's face haunted him, the girl in the stairwell, wrapped in plastic for warmth, her eyes carrying the weight of 1,000 betrayals. He had called Child Protective Services, thinking it would be the responsible step. But he quickly learned nothing in this arena was simple. The CPS office smelled of burnt coffee and stale paperwork. Richard sat across from a woman with tired eyes and a clipboard that looked heavier than stone. She introduced herself as Ms. Alvarez, caseworker, voice polite but distant. "You said you have information on a child. Anna Johnson, correct?" "Yes," Richard said. 7 years old, living with a grandmother who's unwell. I found her sleeping in a stairwell. She has no reliable guardian. I want to make sure she's safe." Ms. Alvarez scribbled notes. "We appreciate your concern, Mr. Coleman, but these cases take time. We'll investigate, speak with her guardian, determine if removal is necessary." Richard leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Time is a luxury she doesn't have. She's a child sleeping with garbage bags to keep warm." The caseworker met his gaze, unfazed. She'd seen desperation before. "Mr. Coleman, I understand, but you can't just walk in and decide custody. The system doesn't work that way." Richard clenched his fists beneath the table. He was used to control, to transactions sealed with signatures and deadlines. This system moved with glacial indifference. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. By afternoon, the story had leaked. Billionaire intervenes in South Bronx custody case. Is this compassion or a publicity stunt? News anchors speculated about Richard's motives. Social media turned savage. Hashtags bloomed. Hashtag billionaire baby snatcher. #preparenting. #South Bronx Truth. Reporters crowded the hospital entrance. Microphones ready, lenses aimed like weapons. Richard's assistant, Neen, stormed into his temporary office at the hospital. It's spreading fast. They're dragging up the Harlem zoning project again, saying you displaced families for luxury condos. They're painting you as a hypocrite pretending to save one kid, while profiting from pushing out hundreds. Richard's jaw tightened. He remembered that project. Well, he'd funded affordable housing, gone above legal requirements. But in the court of public opinion, nuance rarely mattered. Get the records, he ordered. Every contract, every receipt, every interview. I want facts ready to go. If they want war, they'll get war with truth. Neen hesitated. Sir, you're stepping into something ugly. Are you sure? Richard turned toward the window where the city sprawled, restless and brutal. She stayed with my son when no one else did. That girl matters more than my reputation. That night, Richard found Anna again, sitting quietly by Ethan's bedside. Her cracked phone balanced on her knees, thumbs scrolling though the screen. She looked up when he entered, eyes wary. They're talking about you on the news, she murmured. I know, they're saying you don't care, that you're just doing this for cameras. Richard crouched so he was eye level with her. Do you believe that? She studied him, long and hard. Then she shook her head. No, you didn't have to come. But you did. For the first time that day, Richard allowed himself to breathe. But outside that hospital room, the storm only grew. Editorials demanded, why this girl? Why now? Politicians sniffed opportunity, questioning whether billionaires should be allowed to intervene in custody cases. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse with signs, protect families, not PR and justice, not charity. And in the shadows of South Bronx, a figure watched from a cracked apartment window, yellowed teeth, scar slashing across his cheek. Reggie, the man who once kept Anna tethered to his orbit. She's got herself a rich daddy now, he muttered to his friend, tapping a cheap burner phone against his palm. Looks like she forgot where she came from. The friend smirked. What you gonna do? Reggie grinned, slow and menacing. Remind her. Back at the hospital, Richard tucked Ethan in and turned to Anna. Her scarf slipped from her shoulders, revealing bruises he hadn't noticed before. Anna, he said quietly, did someone hurt you? Her body stiffened. She looked away. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Richard pressed. Her silence stretched, heavy as stone. Then, in the smallest voice, she said, he'll come back for me. Richard's blood ran cold. Who? She didn't answer, but the fear in her eyes spoke volumes. And Richard knew the fight wasn't just in courtrooms or on headlines. It was in alleys, stairwells, and shadows. This wasn't just a custody battle anymore. It was survival. Snow clung to the South Bronx like ash. Richard's driver eased the black sedan down Willis Avenue, wipers smearing gray slush across the windshield. Inside, Richard stared straight ahead, jaw locked, as Neen read from her tablet. Public opinion split. Half the country calls you a savior. The other half says you're exploiting her story. And now, she turned the screen toward him. A grainy photo filled Atana's face on a news chyron. Next to bold letters, who is she really? Richard's stomach tightened. They were dragging Anna into the spotlight before she even had a chance to stand on her own. She didn't ask for this, he muttered. No, Neen agreed. But once the press smells blood, they don't stop. That night, back at the hospital, Anna sat curled in a chair beside Ethan's bed. The cracked phone glowed dimly in her palms. Richard entered quietly, setting down a bag of food. They're saying things about me, she whispered without looking up. Richard knelt beside her. People always say things, but they don't know you. Her small shoulders rose, fell. What if they're right? What if I don't belong here? Ethan stirred and rolled toward her, voice raspy but certain. You stayed with me. That means you belong. Anna blinked hard, her lashes wet. Richard felt something ignite inside him. He had weathered scandals, lawsuits, congressional hearings. But this little girl doubting her worth was the fiercest opponent he had ever faced. Across town, Reggie leaned against a cracked radiator in a dingy apartment. The glow of a TV flickered against his scarred face. He tapped a burner phone against his palm, grin stretching wide. She's on every channel now, he told the man slouched across from him, So? Kid got lucky. Reggie's grin sharpened. Luck runs out. She thinks she's out. She thinks she's safe. But she ain't. She's still mine. He punched a number into the phone. Yeah, he said when the line picked up. I want eyes on her. The school, the house, everywhere. You'll get paid double. Just keep me updated. He hung up and turned back to the frozen screen. Anna's face mid-sentence. Her expression uncertain, brave. His grin faded. Camilla's eyes, he muttered. Just like her mama. For the first time in years, the scar across his cheek throbbed with memory. The threats began quietly. A note slipped beneath the hospital room door. She's not yours. A voicemail on Richard's office line. Low laughter, then silence. A shadow trailing Anna's walk from the cafeteria back to Effen's room. Richard doubled security. POSTED guards outside the room. But still, unease crawled through every corridor. One night, he found Anna wide awake, sitting on the windowsill, knees tucked to her chest. City lights blinked across her eyes. Can't sleep, he asked. She shook her head. Nightmares. He sat beside her. Want to tell me? She hugged her knees tighter. I dream I'm back in the alley where I found Ethan. But this time no one comes. I yell, and no one hears me. Richard's heart clenched. But that didn't happen. I came, I know. Her voice cracked. But it feels like something's coming. Like I'll have to go back there. Not the alley, but someplace like it. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Dreams can be warnings, or echoes. But you're not alone anymore. For a moment, she leaned into him. Just a small weight, but it felt heavier than any fortune he'd ever carried. Days later, Anna's grandmother emerged frail, wrapped in a floral scarf, eyes lined with sorrow. Loretta Green. Richard brought her into the hospital room. Anna froze when she saw her. Grandma, she whispered. Loretta's lips trembled. Oh, baby, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Anna hesitated only a second before running into her arms. Tears streaked through the dirt on her cheeks. Richard turned away, throat tight. For all his wealth, there were some reunions no money could buy her still. He saw the truth. Loretta was too fragile, too sick to care for Anna long term. She knew it too. That night, she told the court plainly, I want my granddaughter safe. If that means staying with Mr. Coleman until I'm well, then that's what's best. For once, Richard felt hope flicker. Maybe this battle had a chance. But hope came with backlash. The next morning, tabloids screamed, Billionaire steals black child for PR stunt. Hashtags surged. Protesters shouted outside the courthouse, accusing Richard of exploiting poverty for redemption. In one photo, Anna was captured holding Effen's hand outside school. The caption read, a child caught in a billionaire's game. Richard slammed his coffee mug down, shattering it across marble. Enough, he snapped to his team. This isn't about me. It's about her. Yet he knew the truth. Every step deeper into Anna's world made him a bigger target. And somewhere in the shadows, Reggie was waiting, patient as a wolf. That evening, as Anna drew a sunflower in the corner of her notebook, Richard asked softly, why a sunflower? She didn't look up. Because it keeps its face toward the light, even when the sky is dark. Richard's chest ached. He placed a hand over hers. Then we'll keep facing the light, together. But outside, in a darkened car across the street, Reggie lit a cigarette, eyes locked on the hospital window. She thinks she's found a home. He growled, let's see how long it lasts. The oak-paneled courtroom smelled of polish and nerves. Reporters packed the benches, pens poised, cameras hidden behind legal restrictions, but burning through every description scribbled in notepads. Protesters' chants still echoed from the steps outside. Justice, not charity. And billionaires don't buy families. Richard Coleman sat stiff in a navy suit, his tie knotted tighter than usual. Beside him was Anna, her small frame dwarfed by the wooden chair, the red scarf freshly washed but still frayed. On her other side sat her grandmother, Loretta Green, hands trembling yet steady in spirit. The judge, a stern woman named Cook, lifted her glasses. We are here to determine the guardianship of Anna Camilla Johnson, age 7. The petitioner, Mr. Coleman, seeks temporary custody pending the health of Ms. Green. Counselors, proceed. The CPS lawyer rose first. Your Honor, with all due respect, This appears less like responsible guardianship and more like charity. Mr. Coleman is a public figure, under constant scrutiny. Such attention can be damaging to a vulnerable child. Richard's attorney countered. Your Honor, this is not charity. This is necessity. Mr. Coleman intervened when no one else did. He has the means, the home, and most importantly, the intent to provide safety. The room buzzed with tension. Finally, Judge Cook turned her gaze to the smallest voice in the room. Anna, do you understand why we're here? Anna swallowed, then nodded. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with each word. Because people are fighting about where I belong. Yes, the judge said gently. And where do you think that is? Anna glanced at Loretta, who gave a small, tearful nod. Then she looked at Richard, whose eyes pleaded without words. Finally, she straightened, feet barely touching the ground. My name is Anna Camilla Johnson, she said clearly, and I choose here, with them, with him, because he came when no one else did, because he didn't look away. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Cook studied her for a long moment. Then she set her pen to paper. So ordered, she said. The gavel struck once, sharp as lightning. Temporary guardianship awarded to Richard Coleman, with Ms. Green's support noted. Case adjourned. For a heartbeat, Richard didn't move. Then Anna reached for his hand, small fingers wrapping tight. He exhaled, tension unraveling from his chest. The flash of cameras from the hallway outside was waiting, but in that moment, all he saw was her. You're safe, he whispered. But even safety has shadows. That night, an envelope slid under the wrought iron gate of the Coleman estate. Inside, a note scrawled in jagged letters. She's not yours. She'll never be yours. Richard crumpled the paper in his fist. He knew the handwriting without a doubt. Reggie, security tightened. Guards patrolled the property, but Anna still woke at night, trembling, whispering of footsteps that weren't there. Ethan stayed close, refusing to let her face the nightmares alone. One evening, she confessed to Richard, I used to think the only way to stay safe was to be invisible. He knelt before her, voice steady. Not anymore. Now you have people who will stand in front of you. Her eyes lingered on him, then on Ethan. For the first time, belief flickered in her gaze. Weeks passed. Investigations finally caught up with Reggie. Police raided a Bronx apartment, seizing burner phones, cash, and a notebook filled with crude threats. He was led away in cuffs, snarling, his eyes dark with promise. This ain't over. He spat at the cameras. But for Anna, it was a chapter closed. Spring arrived. The hospital smell faded from memory, replaced by chalk dust and crayons. At school, Anna wrote a poem for an assignment. The hallway. It spoke of walking down endless corridors, waiting for doors that never opened until one finally did. When she read it aloud, her classmates clapped. But Richard, standing at the back, felt his eyes sting. Later, Anna joined a small group of other kids, sitting in a circle of folding chairs. She told them, I'm not here to fix you. I'm not a counselor. But I know what it feels like to be invisible. And I know what it feels like when someone finally sees you. That's what I want for you. A murmur of understanding swept through the group. The invisible had found their voice. Months later, Richard sat on the patio as the city lights shimmered in the distance. Anna curled beside him, Ethan bouncing a basketball in the yard. She sipped cocoa and asked quietly, Do you think it'll ever be normal? Richard chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Normal's overrated. Real peace is knowing you're not alone. Anna leaned into him, eyes on the skyline. Then I guess I'm peaceful. For a man who once measured his worth in stock prices and headlines. That was the richest return he'd ever known. Far across the river, in a jail cell, Reggie paced. He remembered Camila, the mother who slipped away, the child who'd defied him. Rage smoldered, but behind it, something colder stirred. The fight might be over for now, but ghosts had a way of clawing back, and Anna's story, raw and unpolished, was still only beginning.